Hello and welcome to another edition of the Americano Show. We are here in Chicago on North Milwaukee Avenue, for anyone who knows Chicago well. And I'm delighted to be joined by Christopher Hale, who is a Democratic operative and fundraiser from Tennessee originally. Is that right, Christopher?
Yeah, from Tennessee originally, but spent my time across the country. But it's been amazing to be in Chicago, to see folks from all parts of the country. But my twang sticks out around here. We don't have Southern twang is not very rare in this part of the country. So yeah, I definitely have been a bit of an oddball around town. So,
and well, I shouldn't have brought you in so early. I should finish the introduction. We're going to be talking about Joe Biden's speech last night, as all the media are putting it, his speech passing the torch to Kamala Harris at this Democratic National Convention. Christopher, what were your impressions of the speech?
You know, I think I was on the floor last night, and I must admit my bias of having a deep affection for Joe Biden, Irish Catholic, fellow Irish Catholic. But I do think the moment, he did not live up to it in the way that I hoped, for two particular reasons. I think that really the entire purpose of that speech was, as you said, to pass the torch, but also to burnish his legacy as being the one who kept the faith. I don't know if many viewers know this, but of course, Joe Biden's Catholic. He tells his story all throughout his political career. His number one story he's ever told, that he tells like time and again, is when he was a child, his grandmother, when he left the house, she would say, "Joey, keep the faith," which is a reference to St. Paul in the New Testament. But he really did that in his political career of keeping the trust of the American people. And to me, that's Joe Biden's legacy. Is that there is a bit of an obsession with January 6th, and maybe it is or is not politically helpful, but he's kept the faith of the American people. And I felt like last night it was such a laundry list of accomplishments. I thought it was a little bit weird that we felt the need to reiterate while we ran for office in 2020. I felt it was a little bit lacking to the moment. I will say this, though. I think we bailed him out. That 4-minute sustained applause was memorable. And that line at the end where he said, "I gave it my all." I think that was, hopefully, as a Democrat, as a partisan Democrat, I hope that's what sticks out. But the in-between, I don't think, was up to the moment.
Well, let's talk about the lateness, because I think it didn't start till about 10:30 p.m., and pushing it past prime time, for long past prime time for some people. And was that cock-up? Was that just, as the Democratic sources were saying, the previous speakers took too long, they were milking applause lines for too long, and everything got delayed? But they could have just, surely they could have just sped it up. It seemed very odd that it was so late.
It was a mistake. I think that, and I don't think there's any kind of nefarious conspiracy that I know of. No one told me about it. But I think that what we have to realize is that the American political convention was historically not a made-for-TV special. Yeah. And I think both parties have really failed to understand that. I mean, if we recall, Donald Trump finished his speech past midnight Eastern time. But yeah, it hurt. It hurt the cause. I think that as a political operative, I think about a median voter. For me, the most important voter in this country is a middle-aged parent who lives outside of a major American city or a not-so-major American city on the fringes. And so last night, my median voter in my head was a 55-year-old person who lives in State College, Pennsylvania. Yeah, not that exciting of a place. No offense to my State College PA people, but 11:30 at night's too late on a Monday night, and I thought it should have happened about 2 hours earlier. But the speeches were too long.
Felt to me a bit more like a State of the Union address than a convention speech. Convention speeches are supposed to be why you should vote for Kamala Harris, why Kamala Harris is so great, or why the nominee is so great. But this, because it's such an awkward transition, and Biden perhaps isn't very good at dealing with fresh material, so he just went through his laundry list, as he called it.
Yeah, I think it should have been more forward-looking. I think, once again, I actually do not think it should have been so policy-ridden. The purpose of the speech was, I think, twofold, or should have been twofold. Number one, to burnish his legacy, to say what he did, but not list by list. President Biden is very proud of his policy achievements, and Democrats are as well. We perhaps believe it's a bit of a hagiography that he's been the best and most effective president since Lyndon Baines Johnson. There's some truth to that. But I think that really we have to acknowledge that I think when the history is written about Joseph R. Biden in the way that Democrats hope it to be written, the most important thing that he will have done in his career was on July 21st to step down. Once again, going back to the Catholic roots of me and Joe Biden, I remember very vividly talking to him about 7 or 8 years ago, and he said that the most important thing that Benedict XVI ever did, Pope Benedict XVI, was resign the papacy. And no one had resigned the papacy in 600 years.
Yeah.
And no one will remember Benedict XVI in 100 years from now for anything except that he resigned.
That's amazing that he said that to you.
He did, and I think I always think that the willingness to give up power is something that obviously is, and we should put the caveat of willingness. There was obviously pressure for around a month or so, but that will be the most important thing that he did if this election goes the way we hope it to go. And that's at least the story we will tell ourselves. The whole notion is that democracy is at stake, and I think that last night should have been about him being the protector, the pioneer and the protector of democracy. I keep using that phrase, keeping the faith, that his grandmother said. I think keeping and protecting the American way of life, the American democracy, I thought that should have been front and center. It should not have been about infrastructure or the Inflation Reduction Act.
You talk about keeping the faith. I mean, doesn't it require quite a spectacular leap of faith to buy into what we saw last night, what we're seeing at the convention this week? Because, you know, a lot of Republicans think, almost all Republicans think, a lot of independents think, and a lot of cynical journalists like me, outsiders like me, think that Biden's decline was covered up for a long time. Your party knew, I think, deep down that something was wrong, and wasn't really honest with the public about it. And then now we are expected to believe that Kamala Harris, who before Biden went was one of the reasons why he couldn't go, because she was widely thought to be so unpopular, now we're expected to believe that she is this tremendous political force. It's quite a hard sell.
It's a sell, though. I mean, we believe the polling data that the American people are buying in a higher degree than maybe journalists expect. I will say it is remarkable to think that, that the polling data just 3 weeks ago had Kamala Harris as being a widely, deeply unpopular vice president. I think that what happens in elections is as we come closer and closer to deadline, we're 80, 83, 84 days out, I think that the willingness to buck it up and to throw all your energy behind the candidate, it is in some ways hard to believe, but I think it's a reality that people face. And I think that what we must acknowledge is that I think Kamala Harris would be a great president, but if in 2 days the Democratic Party nominated a turd in aluminum foil, we would celebrate the turd in aluminum foil, pretend like they were the best ones for the job. The reality of it is the consolidation of the party at this point in time, whether it be Joseph R. Biden or Kamala Harris or a turd in aluminum foil, is because of Donald Trump. He is the greatest unifier of the Democratic Party. And so I do think that that people have concerns about the way this was handled. I mean, it is remarkable. I'll say this, that, I voted in the Democratic primary 7 months ago or so, and I have no qualms that the delegates picked a candidate I did not vote for. And I think that I think the reality of it is our willingness to usurp norms, if you will, and to pretend that things are normal are a willingness because of who we face in November.
And looking back at that first presidential debate on June 27th, obviously a disastrous night for Joe Biden, but in a very strange way now, do you consider it as something of a blessing? Because it was pulled forward, it was arranged to come forward as a debate. We don't quite know why exactly. If you could give us some insight as to why, that would be great. But it looks like the moment when the Democratic campaign might have saved itself, because it became so obvious that Biden was unsustainable and he had to go.
Yeah, I think so. On why it happened, it's people I've talked to, people who did this, was because we were losing, and we knew we were losing. And the reality of it was the domination of Trump and Trump-induced media for the spring, fall. We just did not see it viable. The next time we could put the president out there was now in mid-August. And I think the notion that Trump was at his weakest, I mean, good gosh, do we remember that 3 weeks before that debate, he had been indicted and convicted on 37 counts, and then we got a crazy summer. So I think that was the calculation. Blessing in disguise, I don't know if I'm willing to go there, but I think a lot of people feel that way. I think that what it did is it put reality in our face. I mean, I think that is what was so stunning about that moment. If there was a cover-up, I certainly wasn't part of it. I think that, and people who worked with President weren't as part of it as much as the indications are. I think that just putting him to the stress of that 90-minute affair and just watching that, I think it was a very clear indication that this was going to be an election that was nearly impossible to win. And
Nancy Pelosi, who seems to have been quite instrumental in pushing Biden to go or to stand down from the race, she has this extraordinary quote when asked about, why she did it, how involved she was. She said, sometimes you've got to punch someone to protect the children. Sometimes you've got to throw a punch to protect the children, I think is the line. I mean, what's that all about?
So I think it's really interesting. I think that I've been surprised by Speaker Pelosi's book tour. This is a woman who was very restrained on press interviews for 20 years of leading this party in the House. I think what she was trying to say is that really that it is to protect the future of the movement, that she had to speak up. And I think that also too, I really want to note that, look, Nancy Pelosi is a peer of Joe Biden in age, in religion, in culture when they came up in and so I think that she felt that she was the only one who had the standing across all communities to really force this decision. And I remember seeing her on the floor last night. I think there was video images. I felt her discomfort seeing her on the floor.
Well, she was joining in with the "We love Joe, we love Joe."
Yeah, we love Joe.
Chant.
Yeah,
but I mean, for the woman who effectively knifed him to be doing that, that's politics at its most cynical and brutal, is it not?
It is brutal. I think cynicism. I don't know if it's cynical in her mind because she, as she said, she was doing it not to advance Nancy Pelosi, but to advance his party. I think one of the things that's most remarkable about Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden is they are the Democratic Party. In a lot of ways, when Barack Obama was elected president of the United States, it was because he had gone beyond the party. He was in his own right a celebrity. But Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden were made by this party. And so I think that her particular critique of Joe Biden, it was soft. She didn't go to the New York Times or write an op-ed like George Clooney. But we could no longer say us, the Biden defenders. Look, I told you, this is an off-the-record conversation, but I'll put it on the record. I told you on or around July 4th that there was 0% chance that Joe Biden would not be our nominee this week. And so I do this for a living. I get paid well to do it. I was wrong. And the reason I was wrong is I had no clue, and those around me had no clue how hard in the paint Nancy Pelosi would go. And when she started going hard, and once again, I want to be clear, she did it in a way that she was plausibly deniable. That was it. There was no going back from that because she represents, as I said, she is the Democratic Party. To be a Democrat is to have an affection and affinity for two people, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. And so when you lost Nancy, I think that was really the dagger.
And so I think did you describe, or perhaps someone else described Joe Biden to me as the Pope of the Democratic Party?
He is. And I want to say why I say that. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, but I was just wondering if he's the Pope, who's Nancy?
Oh goodness. Maybe she's this is a good
chief executive figure.
Well, okay. Maybe she's a British cardinal who stabbed the Pope papacy in the back. To go back to her little Catholic history. But no,
always has to be Brits doing the stabbing. I think. Yeah.
You all are honestly you're the originators. So we learn from the best. But I think that she is the cardinal who yields extraordinary power, and she yields two sources of power that I think are really remarkable. among the other cardinals, among the other elected officials, which matters. Look, all 300 Democrats could have called Joe Biden step down, and the rank and file voters could have ignored them. But I think that Nancy Pelosi has such a institutional connection with rank and file voters that no one cares. God bless Lloyd Doggett. No one cares what Lloyd Doggett says. No one cares what rank and file members say. And even Hakeem Jeffries had deep respect for it. If he called for Joe Biden to step down, it wasn't the same as Nancy Pelosi because she has as much history in this party as Joe Biden. So I think that she's the cardinal who yields equal, if not more, power than Joe Biden. I think I want to go back to Benedict XVI again. Right before his resignation, he said famously he was the Pope, but his power did not extend beyond those four walls of the room he was in. I think by the end of Biden's presidency, his power did not extend much beyond that Oval Office.
So let's talk about Kamala Harris. She has not yet given a TV interview. There's a lot of speculation about that. Her policy announcements have been thin, I think it's fair to say. We don't have a clear idea of how her first 100 days would go. Normally by now you should have a fairly clear policy picture. It seems to be all up in the air. And yet people do seem genuinely excited about it. I mean, as cynical as I am, I can tell that, there is a lot of excitement.
Yeah, I think once again, it's going back. We're not comparing her to the almighty. We're comparing her to the alternative. And I think that the excitement is not fake. It is probably twofold. It is who she's running against. And also, too, I think that it's kind of a fresh breath air to have we haven't had a candidate under 60 years old. I guess she's right at 60 in 20 years. And so I think that the sense that we are moving to the next generation as haphazardly as it happened, I think is her strength. On the policy stuff, I think the hard reality of it is, as much as journalists understandably want policy, the American people do not care. I think that's just the reality of it. The American people are not listening, are not taking their cues from what the White House press corps asked for. And I always remember watching French presidential debates and being like, oh my God, this is very policy driven. And it's just not the reality of American politics. I actually think that if I was the crass operative running Kamala Harris's campaign, I wouldn't even give him the economic speech. Why? You're up and you're surging. So why step on it with something that people can attack? And I think the reality of it is, what's great about being a blank slate is that anyone can put what they think on you that appeals to them.
So we are getting into a phase of American politics where it's good that the campaign is short. Because
we're learning from y'all.
So. It's good that the campaign is short. It's good that Kamala Harris doesn't focus too much on policy because she might slip up. This is all very negative. With the Labour Party in Britain, we called it the Ming vase strategy. This is an extreme version of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a fair argument there, but I think that also too we have. I mean, just the pragmatic realities of an American presidency is. I think that looking at the Republicans' decision to run on Project 2025, there's actually something really interesting about it, because what they're acknowledging is we're not just electing Donald Trump, we are, in a British capacity, electing a government. And I think that we actually would be, it'd be advantageous for my party to really acknowledge we're electing personnel. We're electing a vision of government. And we are electing people that will fight for you and your family in a more progressive, active government way. But by getting caught up in the details, I do think that hurts us. I mean, if you recall, if my hair looks nuts tonight today because I've spent all night with my people. But the conversations that were happening in 2016 and 2020, we were flirting with ridiculous left-wing ideas that were unpopular with the American people. When we have primaries, when we have ugly primaries, we go left.
Well, but you are going left economically. I mean, Kamala Harris has said she will stop supermarket shops price gouging. I mean, that's very left-wing by American standards, is it?
Absolutely. And I think that was the weakness of even giving that speech. I think the reality of it is she doesn't have the votes in this legislature. The great thing about the Democratic Party is that we have to win over median voters. And so, look, if you look at swing state Democrats, they're not going to support left-wing policies, economic policies like that. And so I do think it's a little confusing on why to even go there. I don't think we gain any votes with that policy suggestion. But also too, I think that the reality of this is the functions of this government under Kamala Harris will look part and parcel like Joe Biden's. So I think that it's probably very likely that she and her court is much more progressive than Joe Biden. We know that. That's very clear to anyone who watches. But she's constrained by the government she exists in.
And lastly, Christopher, she's going to give this big speech, her acceptance speech, on Thursday. From what you're saying, I'm not getting the impression that we will learn who the real Kamala Harris is or what her real agenda is.
We will learn about her biography. I think we will learn about her biography, growing up in California, becoming a prosecutor.
Working in McDonald's.
Which, I've been very involved in Democratic politics for a long time. I was very involved in the 2020 primary. I'd never heard that story. So there's a biographical weakness that we actually haven't really fleshed out. And I think that she ran in 2020 as to be a hard, aggressive, in-your-face prosecutor, if you will. And so I think we missed some of those stories. I think it will be biographical in nature. I think the goal of the next 3 days is to learn about Kamala Harris before she was the vice president of the United States. I do not think you're going to get any major policy moves whatsoever. I think it will be part and parcel protecting the gains that we've had and defeating Donald Trump.
Christopher, thank you very much for coming to the Americano podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for having me.
All the best.